J.A.
Time
because this was a team. J.A., we talk about positionless basketball, right? That don't actually exist. You need a point guard and you need somebody to protect the rim. Everything else might be quote unquote positionless, but you need those two elements. And Phoenix had everything in the middle and nothing on the outside, right? That's like cream filling with no Oreo. You need the actual Oreo cookie there to chew on. And I've never seen a team, J.A., not be quick enough and be outsized at the same time. And they're old and they're expensive. I don't see where they go from here short of, AKD, where do you want to go?
It's hard when they're built on a flawed premise. And they assembled a big three without really thinking about what it is that a big three is supposed to provide. And when the Heat did their big three, to me, the whole foundational principle was that you had multiple guys who were capable of being the best player on the floor, right? And it wasn't about, oh, we're just going to overwhelm you. It's that, no, we can have maybe LeBron one night, maybe it's Wade one night, maybe it's Chris Bosh one night. As we came to find out, it really wasn't Chris Bosh on any nights, but yet he became a really super deluxe role player, right? Vital to what they did and did help them to go positionless, right? But you can go positionless when you have your forward is basically an all-time great point guard, right? Which is what LeBron James was. But the thing is, it's supposed to be that like, okay, yeah, you can take turns, all other things being equal, and one guy goes off and can be, it gives you 3 shots at having the best player on the floor. The way the Suns were built, they have 3 guys who need to max out in order for them to have a shot, right? Those guys had to go for like 75, 80 points a game. It wasn't enough for just one to have a great game. We saw it. Devin Booker had a great game, or great scoring output at least, in game 4, but that wasn't enough to help them win. And the way a big three is supposed to be built is that if you have that one guy go off like that, that puts you over the top. But everything else keeps you in the mix. And then you have that one guy that's that difference maker that puts you over the top. So just the way that they're built, it was a flawed big three premise. And as you said, it lacked these fundamental components, which they had before: a great point guard, Chris Paul, and kind of a traditional big man, right? Like DeAndre Ayton.
It felt like it was moves that they felt like they had to make. They had to get off of Chris Paul. They were going to get off of DeAndre, and those relationships had soured. They had fired Monty Williams. Like, in vacuums, you understand the logic behind certain decisions, but it was like none of the decisions were made in concert.
Did you have to get off DeAndre Ayton if you moved Monty Williams? Because the problem was those two couldn't get along.
Right.
So if you get rid of one, to me, you didn't have to get rid of the other.
That's true. But I think there was an element of, we lost this kid and we can't get him back. And I don't know if that was culture as much as it was organizational, because remember, they didn't want to pay him. So that was going to be a sour point.
But that was a different ownership, right?
Same GM. And DeAndre Ayton is clearly one of those guys that, clearly he can drift. He can come and he can go. And he's not necessarily the type of dude that's going to be defensively inclined and be happy not getting the ball. Like, I don't think that necessarily was going to work. It doesn't mean you go out and get expensive as Brad Beal. It doesn't mean that you put Yusuf Nurkic on an island and you don't have any other big man, and you go get Drew Eubanks, whose, I guess, greatest value was getting hit in the face and then calling the cops. You know what I mean? Like, these things are not what makes a championship team. Like you said, I don't know how disappointing they are, because I never thought it would work to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like KD, for as great as KD is, J.A., he needs a system to, like, sort of accentuate the things that he does best. Like, KD can cook you from 35 feet, but that's not the greatest usage of his talent at 35, going on 36 years old. You need someone to create offense for him so he can just go and be Kevin Durant.
So the thing with KD, he turns 36 next year. Mm-hmm. And it's getting a little long in the tooth. So I was looking up, like, guys who won finals MVPs at this age. MJ won his last at 35. Kareem had that one at age 37 in 1985. But generally, you don't see guys this age lead teams to championships. So in that sense, there's a press. You could argue that guys like what LeBron and Steph Curry are doing have kind of shifted or extended the window, right, of greatness later. It's certainly guys are playing greater longer, right? But it's still telling that we don't see guys this age lead teams to a championship, which adds to the urgency. I will remind people that, this was the first iteration of this team. I think similar to Milwaukee, right? It's the first iteration of this team. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's catastrophic if you didn't win a championship in year one. LeBron never won a championship in year one in, Miami or back to Cleveland or out to LA. It rarely happens. It happened for the Celtics, right?
Right.
With the big three. It technically happened for the Lakers when Anthony Davis got there and joined LeBron, and they won a championship that year, but that was a bubble year. And I tend not to discount the bubble championship, but I think in this case it's relevant in that you had a new team that got an extra 4 months in the middle of the season to get to know you. I don't know how much they played together or got to know each other during those 4 months.
Right.
I know it certainly benefited LeBron to have a 4-month break for his body.
Yes, it did
that year. But that's as much as anything. I'm going to say that bubble thing doesn't count in that it was a first year team that won a championship.
I tend to agree with you because, it usually takes time. But if it's built on a flawed premise, all it's going to be is a flawed premise going into year two. Like Bradley Beal becoming older and more expensive, Kevin Durant becoming older and more expensive. And the other thing for me with these guys is if you're not scoring, tell me what else you're doing. Like with Chris Bosh was a really good defender, floor spacer, all that stuff. LeBron, the greatest all-around player in the league at the peak of his powers. Dwayne Wade, really good defender, especially before his knees gave out. Slasher could get out on the break. Like those guys did different things if they were not the offensive focal point. And because Kevin Durant and Devin Booker both like operating in the mid-range, they're occupying the same space on the floor. Neither guy is necessarily going to be the floor spacer. And when Kevin Durant was the floor spacer, he complained that he was just standing in the corner. And then you hire a coach in Frank Vogel, who inevitably is going to walk the plank, of course, right? Because coaches are going to walk the plank. That isn't offensively inclined to create a system that accentuates or at least hides the weaknesses and flaws, of the roster. So there's a lot going on there.
And speaking of Vogel, it's funny. Yeah, he was kind of saying the same stuff. I was like, look, it's not supposed to happen. As he said after the game, he's like, we put this team together with the 3 to 5 year plan in mind. And I'm thinking like, are you going to be around for those 3 to 5 years?
Right.
I'm not sure this is a we. I'm not sure we should be using first person plural pronouns right here. We. So. Yeah, it's a lot of questions. And Vogel, he was out of sorts. Like in one of the first 2 games, I think it was game 1, he just looked so discombobulated on the sidelines there in Minnesota. And that's not him.
Right.
Vogel always had I always thought like almost an undeserved swag. Like from the get-go, when he took over in Indiana, he kind of had this swag to him. Like,
like a cocky from? Thing.
Yeah. I'm like, you don't have like the resume, the credentials necessarily that, but I liked it. And he wore it well and it worked, right? Especially worked in LA. He won a championship with LeBron and Anthony Davis. So, but he was out of character. And that's one of the tests of the playoffs. Like, can you remain true to yourself? Mm-hmm. And Frank Vogel didn't seem like the Frank Vogel that I knew. Like maybe the stress was getting to him, maybe the pressure was getting to him.